Good evening, everyone. It's just turned 6 o'clock, so a warm welcome to our webinar, Remembrance Day, COVID Secure Guidance for Hosting an Event Q&A. Remembrance Day and Remembrance Sunday are significant dates in the nation's calendar where we unite to make sure that no one's forgotten and to remember and honour those who have sacrificed themselves to secure and protect our freedom. Remembrance Day will be observed nationally on Wednesday, the 11th of November 2020, and Remembrance Sunday will be held on Sunday, the 8th of November. This year will feel very different. For the first time in history, the annual ceremony at the cenotaph will be closed to members of the public, with people encouraged instead to join together for a national moment of silence at 11 AM as the service is broadcast nationwide. The national guidance for Remembrance Sunday taking place during the COVID pandemic does allow for local events, but with significant adjustments to ensure the safety of all those involved. This webinar today will review this guidance and answer some common questions that we've received from organisations hosting events and any questions submitted from those taking part on the call. This webinar is brought to you by safety and regulatory colleagues from local borough, district and county councils. And many thanks to all our partners who've helped us to plan and promote this webinar today. Please note, as you can see, that this event is being recorded. So should you remain logged in, we take this as your consent to take part and be recorded. The information provided today is current and correct to the best of our knowledge on the 29th of October 2020. So please note this if you're viewing the webinar at a later date. The format today will be for our panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll review some pre-submitted questions and then open up to your questions from the floor. You can raise your hand at any time or submit your questions via the chat function, which you'll see at the top of the screen, which you can click and open up. My name is Ian Flynn and I work at Warwickshire County Council, and I'll be the facilitator today. I'd like now to introduce then our panel, beginning please with Paul.
Hello, my name is Sergeant Paul Calvert from Warwickshire Police. I work within the COVID cell within Warwickshire Police, but I've also for several years, many years ago, involved in planning the Leamington Remembrance Parade. So I've got a lot of experience of the Remembrance Parade processes as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So good evening, my name's Gemma Stainthorpe and I'm Health Protection Programme Manager at Warwickshire County Council. So I'm here this evening just to give any public health type advice and to hopefully be able to advise these events to go ahead as safely as possible at this time.
Thanks, Gemma.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Jonathan Toy. I'm the Group Manager for Trading Standards and Community Safety for Warwickshire County Council. I've been heavily involved in regular regulatory meetings that have been taking place across the county since the end of March to help advise businesses and develop responses to some of the challenges we've been facing. And I've worked in partnership with some of the guidance on remembrance events for this year. So nice to join you this evening.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Henry Biddington. I'm the Principal Environmental Health Officer for the Commercial Regulation Team at Rugby Borough Council. I've worked alongside Jonathan and Paul and others as part of a regulatory group across Warwickshire since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, looking at regulation and advice for businesses. I've also worked on the Rugby Borough Council Rugby Borough Council's Remembrance Day events. I worked alongside the elected members at Rugby Borough Council, looking at how we can have a ceremony safely and still to commemorate the event. So here, happy to offer any advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry.
Hello, I'm Nicola Hoare. I'm the Food and Safety Team Leader at Warwick District Council. We'll be looking at risk assessments for any of the events that are planned and proposed to be operating within Warwick District.
Thanks, Nicola. So the government, as we know, has issued advice on the hosting of events around Remembrance Day. Would anyone like to quickly give us the highlights of that guidance?
Ian, would it be helpful if I just kicked off and just kind of set the scene a little bit, and perhaps members of the panel or people who've joined us this evening might like to ask some questions or share with some of the things that they're putting into place. So I think firstly to say on behalf of all of us, you know, remembrance events, whether it's on the Remembrance Sunday or on the 11th itself, are absolutely important parts of our culture, and recognise, as Ian said right at the beginning, some of the sacrifices that are being given by our residents over the many years in terms of the First and Second World War and other conflicts events as well. And it's right that we should try and remember them. It's absolutely right that we should try and do that. And despite the challenges of COVID and coronavirus, we want to be able to do something that properly commemorates those events and those people. Because of the COVID situation, it means, as Ian says, things are very different this year to how they have been before. We want some of those events to be able to go ahead, but we have to recognise, in order to do them safely, we have to think about the numbers that are taking place in those events, and how we work with you to try and make sure that those numbers are kept to a minimum, because we know that COVID-19, coronavirus, spreads between people who are in close contact with each other, and any event that brings lots of people together increases the risk, whether it's indoors or outdoors. Remembrance events is a non-religious event, but it's quite often caught up within other types of services and events as well. So we've been speaking to a number of people from the faith sectors in terms of things that they might want to do as part of a normal Sunday type service or activity, which also recognises that remembrance event. Our advice has been very much to try and keep numbers to a minimum. Now, that isn't always easy, and there's lots of debate about what does a minimum number mean. What we're trying to say to people is that if you look at the regulations for other types of events that are taking place, those numbers vary. Sometimes it can be a group of no more than 6, whether it's indoors or outdoors, if you treat people in a household bubble, or connected with friends. Sometimes it can be in terms of the number of 15 for certain types of events that take place, or up to 30 if it's a life type event. Your event that you might want to run could have some variations of those, but the minimum number you can deal with is the better for everybody. So I know that Henry in his area within rugby has very much been looking at that number between 6 and 10, with spectators around the event, but actually people actively participating, keeping it to that minimum number. So it may be the events that you're looking to run would involve your mayor or your key dignitaries, and a representative from one of the armed forces or services, rather than a number of people from those particular services. There are areas that are having those numbers kept to a minimum, and then after that small event, encouraging or enabling people from different areas to come along and lay a wreath at a memorial within a time event, a time slot. That way, then it makes it a lot easier to manage. If it's part of a order of service, the size and the number will depend on the venue that it's being held in, and there will be a risk assessment for the actual venue that it will be held in. And I know that a lot of that work has already been done. The key point would be if you're then moving people from, say, inside a faith-based or religious venue to an outside a memorial event, and think about how that movement will take place. There's one other key consideration, which I know you'll all be thinking of when you're planning your event, is those people who will want to be part of it and their own vulnerabilities. it's absolutely vital that if we know that people in certain age groups or certain backgrounds are more vulnerable to COVID. So your planning in terms of that vulnerability is really important, and think about how you might do that in a way that makes sure they're kept safe at a safe distance. And if you are putting any seating outside for particular people because of their own infirmity or vulnerability, that is done in a way that keeps them safe at the same time.
Couple of hands up there, Gemma. I think you were first.
Hi, yeah, just wanted to come in and support everything that Jonathan's just said. Obviously, this is a really significant part of our year, you know, as a country and as a local community as well. We really want, you know, it to be celebrated as safely as possible. Just a few things to think about. I think Jonathan's mentioned it's about kind of thinking outside the box a little bit this year, around lots of kind of different ways that we can try to remember this day and to celebrate in a way this day as much as we can, given our limitations. So, for example, we've sort of heard from some communities that might be deciding to sort of follow a similar pattern to the NHS clap. So around the 2-minute silence, encouraging local residents to go out into their sort of front gardens and to take part in a clap. That's just an idea of something that could really raise community spirit and also, you know, bring people together on this really important day and this really important time. Again, Jonathan mentioned, instead of organisations, you know, everybody wants to be involved in these days, and it's difficult. Obviously, everyone's feeling really passionate about it, but it might be just the fact of having one representative from a particular group coming and kind of representing the wider group, and just trying to think a little bit more creatively about how we can still mark this occasion.
Thanks, Gemma. And Henry, I think you were next.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I was just going to just a little bit of insight in what we did at Rugby, because about a month ago we decided to look at how we were going to organise our Remembrance Day event on the Sunday, and we did make a decision then that we were going to have six members at the actual event ceremony itself, with some support staff. So we're going to live stream the event over our social media, and the dignitaries are going to be coming from Rugby Borough Council, the Mayor and the local armed forces. So we will have representatives from those groups laying the wreath to commemorate the Remembrance Day. And that was a decision we sort of took about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And unfortunately, because of the increase in cases within Rugby, we made that decision, and we're encouraging the public not to attend in great numbers, because we don't want a gathering of large people, which may encourage a transmission of COVID. And instead, we're doing other things around the borough. So we're looking at promoting children to colour in poppies and stick them on their windows and on other local buildings within Rugby Borough. And again, as Gemma said, the sort of 2-minute doorstep silence followed by a clap. And obviously live streaming the event so the community can still get involved and watch the event as it occurs, but without having to attend and have large numbers. So that's the way we sort of organise things in Rugby, and the way we've come to try and have a safe event as possible, while still remembering, obviously, Remembrance Day and following the following the commemorations.
Thanks, Henry. So, panel, I think you've set us up well for the what's been done and some useful advice and tips. I've got you down there as Kim Smith, but perhaps that's not your name. Could you introduce yourself and where you're from? I need to take you off mute. Oh, there you are.
Thank you. Yes, good evening. I'm Church Warden of St Peter and St Paul's Church, Water Orton. Our vicar, the Reverend Paul Tullett, is also with us. Yeah, I'm struggling with some of what I'm hearing. I listened in on to the webinar yesterday as well, so I've sort of listening through your guidance twice. We have a very new memorial in Water-Orton. It was put up 2 years ago for the 100th anniversary. For the previous 2 years, we have had a parade from the parish church to the memorial site. At the memorial site, we've had what is very much a religious service. Clearly, it is being organised by the church. It is primarily a religious service with all the acts of remembrance and wreath laying as part of that. This year, we've already decided the procession parade certainly can't go ahead. It would be impossible to control people's actions, even if they started being shepherded into 2 metre apart groups. That wouldn't continue, so we've scrapped that idea. We do very much want to go ahead with the event on the memorial site, somewhat scaled down from previous years, but not massively scaled down. We've submitted what I felt was a fairly detailed risk assessment, which I talked through earlier today with Sharon Gallagher. And with 1 or 2 modifications, I felt she was fairly happy with what we were proposing. So very brief rundown. The area which I have in mind, which is the large green area on which the memorial cross is positioned, and an adjoining short stretch of very local road, we would close off and cordon that off with barrier tape, with substantial barriers across the road as well, having applied for permission to close that stretch of road. The pavements either side of the barrier tape would still be accessible for people to get past without going into the road. I've paced out an area of at least 1,000 square yards. And on the basis of sort of 4 square yards per person, I estimated we could accommodate 250 people in there. I have suggested we would reduce that to, say, 150, maybe fewer than that. The intention would be to have 4 openings in the barrier tape, with stewards at each opening, counting people in and taking names and contact details as they enter. So we had our track and trace information. Through our public address system, we would encourage people to maintain their distance from each other and to wear face masks. So that is in essence what we proposed to do, or what we wanted to do, and that's the basis of our risk assessment. We would also be putting the service out through Zoom and encouraging people wherever possible to watch through Zoom from the safety and comfort of their homes. But there will inevitably be people turning up who want to be there in person. There would be some wreath laying from a small number of invited wreath layers. I believe the parish council want to send a representative. Whether we invite some of the local youth groups to lay a wreath, as has happened in previous years, that's still something I have to debate with Paul. One of my concerns is what authority we have to prevent people going onto that cordoned off area. They could simply say, no, it's a public area, you can't stop me, in which case we lose control of the number going on. Once we get beyond our 100 or 150, they could still insist on going on, which is a concern. Again, the face masks, we can encourage people to wear face masks, we can encourage them to distance, but we are really dependent upon people applying their common sense. So I'd appreciate any comments you have on our proposals there. The other thing was we had originally proposed to have a choir there of about 10 members. They would be robed, so they'd be very clearly identified as a choir, not simply members of the public. Members of the public would be discouraged from singing, again, with announcements through the PA system, and there would be a keyboard player to provide music for the choir to sing. I'd considered putting microphones in front of the choir so they wouldn't need to sing so loudly. In terms of playing of other instruments, the last post and the rouse will be played off a CD, as we've done in the past 2 years. I think that essentially covers it. So, as I said, I'd really appreciate your comments there, please. Paul, have I nod your head or shake your head? Have I missed anything, Paul? Okay, I think we're all right there. So, any comments, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And you did say you were church warden, but what was your name? So is it Kim Smith?
It is Kim Smith. It's short for Kimberly.
Right.
Which is also a girl's name, I know.
Okay, just checking. Thanks, Kim, and thank you for sharing the details. I'm sure that the panel will have some advice, and I'd certainly be keen to understand if there are other events around Warwickshire planned of that scale, and perhaps our panel will be able to enlighten us on that. But I see, Gemma, you have your hand up, so shall we start with you?
Thank you. Thanks for that overview, Kim. Yeah, really good to hear that. I know that other panel members will want to come in and sort of make comments on this one, especially as well. So with regard to, I know that you've scaled down your current sort of idea of numbers and things compared to what it was before, but we're asking areas to really think about what their local sort of infection rates are at this time. It is publicly available, and you say that you're within Water Orton, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so you may or may not be aware of a slight rise in cases in your area at the moment, which is of quite concern to us in public health, and it's a tricky situation. I've heard it's quite a small community, and especially with events like this, I think it's quite a community focused event that might pull in, as you say, perhaps 150 people. And given certain transmission rates at the moment, it makes me a little apprehensive, especially sort of hearing around some of your reservations about how well you think you can control the attendees, etc. And I'd like to hear from some of the panel members on that, I think, this evening. But just to kind of reiterate as well, with regards to, I think the Zoom broadcast is a fantastic idea. And I think, especially given Water Orton situations at the moment and your neighbouring areas as well, I think it's a fantastic kind of route to go down at the moment. I think I want to say, you know, this isn't an ideal for anyone or any particular area in Warwickshire at all. At the moment, we are all facing a rise in cases. It's not just Water Orton, and I think it's a case of a lot of organisers having to relook at numbers at the moment. I'd like to hear from other panel members around, you know, because 150 to me is still quite a high amount of people, and I think there's something around balancing, you know, taking into consideration the significance of this day, which is hugely significant, and the morale that brings, and the, you know, and things associated with that, based against imminent threat within local communities, of which, you know, a large part of me is concerned. So I think it's a really, really tricky situation. I'm very happy to take this conversation out of the webinar and to talk to you a little bit more, but I'd be really keen to hear others' thoughts on it.
Thanks, Gemma. There's a variety of hands up. George, I know you put your hand up first, but perhaps we'll go over to Paul. I've just seen you Paul Tullett, that is. Sorry, Paul Carver, I know your hand's up too.
Yeah, I was just going to say earlier on, someone commented about keeping the people actually involved to a minimum. I think we can do that. So I think we could have maybe half a dozen people actively involved, maybe one or two more if there's more people laying a reef, but that's all they would be doing. So I think we can keep those numbers down. There's an active conversation already as to whether or not we have the choir. So maybe we could not have the two hymns, and take those out of the order of the service. We're certainly talking about that as an option, bearing in mind some of the choir members are quite elderly as well. But in terms of the audience, we can certainly encourage parishioners to watch it on Zoom from home, but we can't prevent them from turning up. As Kim said, it's a public space, and in previous years we've had 300 or 400 people turning up in the last 2 years since we had the War Memorial. I suspect that the number will be well down because of the COVID. We'll be encouraging people on Facebook to join us from Zoom. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. George, can I just ask, is your question related to Water Orton, or is it separate? You might need to take yourself off mute, George.
So yes, it's not related to Water Orton.
Oh, okay. So, do you mind if we come back to you then after we
finish clear Water Orton, and then I want to talk about Kenilworth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, George. Okay, so Paul Carver, I think your hand was up next.
Yes, thank you. And it's reference what Kim said basically about how would you stop when you got to the 150 and things like that. And it is a real difficult answer to give on that. Like you said, it is a public space. People are going to want to come. Like I said, for many years, I was involved into the Leamington Remembrance Parade, and it really, really difficult to control the public because they really want to see, they really want to be involved. And, you know, even in the normal circumstances, that was really hard to control. So in this world we're in at the moment, it is really difficult. There is no easy answer to give you on that, Kim, I'm afraid, because, you know, it's a public space. How do you stop people? How would you turn around to people and say, sorry, yes, you can come in, no, you can't, because everybody will want to think they've got a right to, you know, remember this day as if, you know, quite rightly, everybody should want to remember the day, but it's really, really difficult in this set of circumstances. And like Gemma said about Water Orton, the rates of infection at the moment and things like that. So for me, it's very much about what the other Paul said, about getting those messages out on social media it will be Zoomed, it will be a live event. And really sorry to say this, it's about actively trying to say to people, encourage people not to attend and to watch it on Zoom. And that goes against everything that I want to say to you, I've got to be honest. And it does, I expect for the whole of the panel here, but it's one of those where we're actively going to have to try and say to people, please don't attend. We are doing everything we can as a community to be able to remember this day by doing it on Zoom, and this is the link, etc., etc. But you could put yourself in a position where you set up that system for people to attend, and you get to the whatever number you've got, and then you could end up in arguments with people, and that is the last thing you want on this day. I'm sure nobody would want that today, and nobody would want, as a police officer, I would never want to be called to a Remembrance Parade because that was going on as well. So it's really difficult. So it's going back to what Jonathan said about is what can you proportionally do to give this day the justice it deserves and let other people see it as well.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I still audible? Yeah.
You are, Kim, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sort of thank you for that, Paul. Only comment there is that applies whether we limit our number to a dozen or 150. You know, a small number they're going to push in and probably be even more obstinate.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that, and it's weighing up the odds of, do you put a facility in to get a certain amount of people, or do you not put that facility in at all and actively discourage people to come in at all? And it's one of those that you know the community of Water Orton better than me. You know how people are going to take the request to do certain things and things like that. But that's all got to be balanced out as well with COVID, with the rates of infection, the vulnerability of the people that are going to be attending. That's a biggie. You know, you don't want it becoming a super spreader event or whatever the terminology could be because of the people who are coming. So it's trying to weigh everything up. And like I said, I can't give you a straight answer to how you would do it and manage it. It's really, really difficult. But sometimes if you put something in place it actually encourages people to come rather than not putting something in place. And it's trying to weigh that up now in the community.
Okay, Paul, thank you. So messaging is important. Paul, I see your hand's gone up, but Jonathan, can we flip over to you for now?
Yeah, I'll try and be brief, because I know there's some people from Leamington want to come in and ask a bit about their events as well. Paul, really encouraged to hear what you were saying about how you would manage the numbers for the key people taking part in the event. I'm going to offer the same as Gemma did. You know, if you want us to jump on a joint team meeting with you and Kim and Sharon, we could have a look at the event plans that you've got and see how we can help support you and advise you. If you can find a way, I mean, the practicalities are, if you can find a way where those key dignitaries and key individuals can be in one very clearly demarked area, and those people who are spectating are then demarked in some distance away and retain themselves within their own groups of no more than 6, then I'm sure there's advice. But the important thing is keep numbers to a minimum. Discourage, as people have said. Happy to work with you on the plans. Keep numbers to a minimum as best you can, and be clear with people that that's what your intention is, because you want to keep people safe. You know, and I am going to be a little bit more provocative than Gemma has been. You know, if it only, you know, we've got evidence that it only takes an individual to go to a particular event innocently, or innocently not knowing that they might be COVID positive, and infect people in double numbers. Yes.
Yeah.
I may be particularly talking about an incident in Water Orton, right? So let's be clear about this. This is close to home.
Yeah.
And it's as Gemma says, nobody wants to go to an event and suddenly find people who've been at that event are taken seriously ill, and because of the vulnerabilities, that illness turns to something which is far more fatal. Nobody wants that to happen. That's what we're here to help you do. So if we can jump on a call with you early next week, very, very happy to try and work with you and advise you and give the best support we can.
Okay,
thanks,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Tollett, did you want to come in again?
Thank you for that offer, Jonathan. I think we should take you up on that.
Yeah.
Will there be a police presence there on the day?
Paul?
Are you sorry? You're talking on the day of the event or for the planning?
On the day of the event.
Unlikely. I'm not sure. It would be down to the local policing team to where they are on those days as such. You would have to speak to the local policing team for Water Orton. If you've not got their details, then I can supply them later.
But I guess, Paul, the police service would be looking to avoid policing particular events just because of the pressure on resources.
Yeah, we don't routinely police events anymore, and we haven't done for many years. There is the police presence usually at Remembrance Parade to have been part of the ceremony more than the policing of the event as such. But it's unlikely that there will be a police presence. I mean, I'm not certain on that, so I couldn't say with regard to that. But you can always talk to your local safer neighbourhood teams, which their email address is on the police website if you want to discuss it with your local teams.
Thank you. I will be posting an email address, business@warwickshire.gov.uk. So if you do want to get in touch with anyone here, email that address and we'll forward it on to the right person. So that's just business@warwickshire.gov.uk. I know there's a question in chat around Leamington, and we're going to go shortly to George. But Paul and Kim, I think we've got an action there to arrange a online meeting next week.
Yes, please. Yes, appreciate that.
Yeah. So thank you for your questions and comments. So
thank you very much for your help. Thank you.
We'll move on then, shall we, to George? Did you want to pick up your question?
I say, struggling to unmute myself for some reason. I hope I'm with you, am I now? Right.
We can hear you, yes.
And to put it in perspective, the event in Kenilworth traditionally is a very significant event in the town. Thousands there, over 50 wreaths laid, and a proper religious service. So the actions that have been taken so far, I think, are just worth clarifying. That there'll be no parade. None of the youth organisations are taking part, of course, which means that none of the parents will be there from the youth organisations will be the luck as well. So the number of people involved is much reduced. The town council is going to live stream this on Facebook and on YouTube. So we want to discourage people from attending. Having said all that, the general mood of inviting people if they want a wreath or not this year is most organisations want a wreath. A number of people have dropped out, so the number of wreaths is down. You know, we've discouraged it, and also by double actions. For example, let me quote one: the 2 regiments, 1 person can lay 2 wreaths. So we can cut the number of wreath layers down even more than we can cut the number of wreaths down. Having said all that, we've got the vast expanse of Abbey Fields, so we've got plenty of room to play with. And thinking it through, we decided that the safest way of doing this is to deal with what you can keep under control. So the church service we've talked about, there'll be no hymns, no band, no singing, so it'll be a shorter service. One clergyman person instead of 5, and so forth. We've obviously got to have a standard bearer from the Legion and the wreath layers, and we put them within an enclosed area because we can control that. We can get them spaced at 2 meters apart with it, without all the other people, particularly the scouts guides, take up a lot of space normally. Around the War Memorial, we can mark an area out and control who goes in there and know exactly who's there, which also ties in with, of course, with track and trace. So I'm very confident that we can manage that situation. We can ask people to wear masks. We can't force them to, as I understand it. Nobody can because it's outside. My concern then is that, and the town clerk and the deputy town clerk can control the numbers because it's sort of authority figures, and we can have a few stewards if necessary. Well, yes, but my concern is that we can't then control in the vast acres of Abbey Fields who turns up and who doesn't turn up. We can discourage people from coming. We can make sure that the organisations that are laying a wreath, that only 1 person from the organisation comes, because we can contact them directly and say 1 person. But the thing that's confuses me a little bit is the government statement listing the people who are legally entitled to be present. I don't know how familiar you are with that list, but there is a list published of those who are legally entitled to be present, which, for the sake of argument, would include all the town councillors. But we're telling the town councillors we don't want them there. Yeah, we want the mayor to lay the wreath. And I am concerned that this, I hope it isn't too public a statement, and I shan't shout it loudly, but if all the people who are legally entitled to be there turned up, it will be very, very difficult to control them. I'm afraid that in the outside area beyond the ropes, the public is entitled to be in Abbey Fields. We can ask them to be in groups of 6. We can ask them to separate, but I'm not sure that we have any powers at all to control them. We will do our best by various means to dissuade people from attending where it's all possible. But I believe we looked at an alternative plan, and if you actually restrict it very small, half a dozen, you're more likely to get other people coming in on the outside because they feel excluded. So all the organisations are included, if that makes sense, all that want to be. So I'm not sure there's a question there really. I think my question is how do we interpret this government statement that says all ex-servicemen, for a start, all servicemen, all clergy, all councillors, all MPs are entitled. It's funny because it's written as they are legally allowed to be there, which we'd have to ask Paul this one. It's good to see Paul again, by the way, Paul Carr. it seems to make a distinction between the people who are legally entitled to be there and the people who are just there because they want to be there.
Okay, thank you, George. Can I just ask if you've had your hand up and you've finished, can you take it down?
Yeah.
I think, Jonathan, your hand is fresh.
I'm not sure about that, Ian, but anyway, thank you for inviting me back in. George, look, I've had some conversations, and we've had some conversations with your town clerk and also the dean as well, who's been very active in organising this event. You couldn't have done any more than you're doing. You really couldn't, and I have to compliment you, and I know there's other people on this like Stephen as well. They're absolutely doing the best they can in terms of what is a difficult situation. And you're absolutely right. If you go through the list of people that's in the Remembrance event exemptions, you probably could fill Abbeyfield, couldn't you, with all the names of whatever else. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The really important thing is exactly what you've said. If you've got someone who is coming, say, as a councillor or as a member of the armed forces or the scouts or the youth groups, have a representative. Let's not invite all of them, because people will understand. And you've done that, George. You've done the best thing. And as I've said to other people before, we've said to other people on these calls, that small number in that group is really important, because you're sending out a really important message, which is, let's keep this to a minimum. If people turn up to spectate and they're in areas which are spread out and they remain in their groups of 6, then that's the best you can possibly do. We wouldn't expect you to do any more than that. And every area is very different. An environment in one area, like you're talking about, Abbeyfield, is very different, say, to a town centre location, where actually the proximity brings people closer together. So every area is very different. But all we can do is ask people to do their very best in terms of minimising the numbers, keeping the people who are coming to individuals, not whole groups of people representing organisations. And actually just to thank you for taking all of that on board and doing the things you're doing, because you are, by your very actions, demonstrating your commitment to keep your communities safe. That's what you're doing. And I can only thank you, as I would to Stephen and to the Dean and to Kim and Paul and other people who've been on this, that you're doing your very best. People's behaviour, as we found out throughout the whole of the COVID period, varies tremendously, don't we? But all we can do in our walks of life is set the standards we want for other people to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Hi, George. Just to basically come back and reiterate what Jonathan said, but to answer the questions that you specifically said, it's very much like I told Kim. It's about getting those messages out as best you can to people, to keep the numbers down to as a minimum as possible. The last thing you want really on a day like this in a Remembrance Parade is to have the worry of, are people here, are there too many people, etc., etc. So the planning is key, the messaging getting out. You can do what you can do. Like Jonathan says, you cannot predict at a public event how many people are exactly going to turn up. It's just that messaging, getting that message out. We are Zooming it, we are doing it on Facebook, we are doing it this, etc. Reiterating that with like public health type messages as well, to backing up the justification of why you're doing it this way, etc. But it's a bit like Jonathan said. Both Kim and yourself, you're planning as best you can for this event. You're listening to what people are saying. You're trying your best. We cannot predict. Nobody can predict who's actually going to turn up to these events. And like I said, we don't want to come along as police because we've got reports of this. That's the last thing on earth that we want on a Remembrance Parade, is someone ringing us up because we've had a complaint about something. And I will say this, that working on COVID since March, you'd be amazed what people ring up and report to us that people are doing, and we really don't want that. But just reiterate, you can only do what you can do, but it's the messaging is the biggest key out of this. Telling people who you're inviting, telling people who you're asking to stay at home, remember it in a certain way, or whatever that may be, and how they can see it themselves. But just going back to what I said, George, it is not about you can control it as best you can, but we don't expect you to start having arguments with people because there's too many people there. That's just not fair on you. That's not fair on the event, the remembrance, and things like that.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So messaging is key, and going back to something that Gemma said earlier, perhaps reminding people of the alternative ways that they can pay their respects this year at home if need be. So thank you, Paul. So George, if that's okay, I think we'll go over now to look at Leamington, unless you wanted to raise anything else.
No, I was just going to say thank you for those comments, because it was reassuring coming from Jonathan. And I can say to Paul that I have spoken with our SNT, and let's put it this way, Paul. Officially, they definitely won't be there, but they're well aware of what's going on.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Nicola?
Hi, yes, can I just add, George, I've had sight now of the event plan that yourself and Maggie have put together. Very comprehensive. I was very pleasantly surprised. So well done there. So really very well thought out. Considered everything we'd have required.
So I don't want to hog this, but since you've raised that, some questions have been raised. We've written the answers. I don't think there are any showstoppers.
Okay, lovely. Okay, well, should we have a chat offline about that? Okay, lovely. Thanks. Thank you, George.
Okay, thanks, George. So, Stephen, you had some comments or questions about events in Leamington.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief overview, if I could. A little while ago, I had a very detailed conversation with Jonathan, which I was very grateful for. I'm very new to working in Leamington. I've only been here 3 or 4 weeks, so I don't have the background knowledge of previous events, but obviously I'm aware it's a very significant event in the town. We have looked to massively change the event given the current circumstances. We are going to have an event of up to 25 people in total. That is going to be an outdoor event at the memorial, which will be, we've discussed with Warwick District Council, and CJ's events will be barriered off, and only invited participants will be able to enter that area essentially, and that those invited participants are much smaller in number than previously. So some organisations simply won't participate, and others, as has been alluded to, will have smaller numbers of representatives. And obviously we will space those people out in that space, and all the usual measures will be in place. Obviously, given its location, it is very difficult to control what happens beyond those boundaries. Quite simply, we're perfectly happy to go with the corporate message of our partners that, you know, please don't come at all, essentially, please stay at home. So in that sense, we just want, in an ideal world, we would just have the event without any significant numbers of people watching, but we appreciate the limitations in that regard. We've done many of the things we talked about. We're keeping the service very short. There will be no singing, no hymns, no choir. There'll be a single bugler. So we hope that we've had that conversation with our partners and everything is as well as it can be. We have submitted a risk assessment, which we've shared. I've not had any particular feedback on that. So if there is any, please do get in touch with us and let us know. Also, because I don't have the links to other relevant partners, if there are people we should be talking to, please do let us know, and we'll do that as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Jonathan?
Yeah, I just kind of really wanted again to commend the work that Stephen's done, and you know, it's really great to work with people who are being thoughtful in terms of how you're running these events. I can only thank Stephen so much for taking on board the things we talked about. There was a conversation we had, Stephen, I'm sure you remember, when we briefly talked about what does Plan B look like. And the reason why that's really important is, you know, we're talking about Warwickshire, aren't we, in tier 1 right now, And you know, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 10 days. I couldn't actually tell you what's going to happen in the next 48 hours, to be honest with you. You know, there'll be areas neighbouring Water Orton that could easily go into Tier 3. And there could be areas of Warwickshire or the county as a whole that could potentially go into Tier 2. So what does Plan B look like? And I think if you're doing your planning really carefully, and I know Stephen's done this in terms of the numbers and how you can manage it, if you've done your planning really carefully, Plan A and Plan B can look very similar, can't they? Because if you're managing at 25 and you've carefully planned it, whatever then happens, you've still got that little bit of ability to say, yes, we can manage it. We can still manage it, despite the fact that things might go a little bit more into a tighter area. That's the thing to think about. It will be the same message I would give to Kim and to George and anybody else. What would Plan B look like? As I said, can only commend Stephen, because I know what he's put into place would meet that Plan B were it to happen.
Can I just check then, Nicola, you've had sight, hopefully, of the risk assessment. Does that cover everything it needs to do?
The risk assessment came through to me this afternoon, and I've been in back-to-back meetings. So, Stephen,
Okay.
Apologies, I've not had a chance to look at it.
No problem.
Now, I will do so tomorrow and give you some feedback.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Paul?
Just one thing for Stephen, really. I mean, I'm aware of how big the Leamington Remembrance Parade used to be, because I was involved in it many years ago. But have you linked in with the local Safer Neighbourhood team for Leamington at all with regard to the Leamington? Because obviously that will have potentially quite a large pull. I totally accept all the planning you've put in place, and Jonathan's more than happy with it. It'd just be worth making sure you've linked in with the local Leamington Safer Neighbourhood team.
I shall do that, Paul. I'm actually away on holiday this week, but they have been in touch with us to touch base, so I'll make sure I do that as soon as possible.
Sergeant Trent McMurray is the sergeant for Leamington Town Centre if you need it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I don't see any additional questions from the floor. Do our panelists have any closing comments that they want to make? Paul?
Just from me personally, from a police perspective, you know, I just want to wish all the people on here a successful and safe Remembrance Day. Like I said, I've been involved with it for many years, and it is a really respectful day, and it's a real shame that the situation we're in, but also I do appreciate and thank all those people that are here that have listened to the advice that's been given, taken it on board and trying to plan those safe events, and joining this webinar to hear that is appreciated as well. So I'd just like to pass on the thanks, and I wish you all the best with the Remembrance page that you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. George?
It's all right. I wanted to say thank you. It's very useful to share ideas tonight. One question I wanted to ask, if I may, of public health or a medical side of things. And I'm well aware, of course, of having a university in the area. We're told that the young people are the ones that have got the proportion of the increase in this area. And of course, with due respect to the university students, most of them won't come anywhere near the Remembrance Parade. They're not part of the town. So although you've talked about the vulnerability of the old, and I certainly got one or two members of the British Legion that I don't want to see there, but I've got to tactfully tell the President is not required. Can anybody comment about the risk, in the sense that it would have, let me put it this way, it was right to cancel the fireworks because of the average age present there would have been very low with the students. I do feel a little bit of comfort, if I can grasp at it, from the fact that the youth, for the most part, will not be present on the Remembrance Sunday. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's Gemma from Public Health. I just wanted to come in, George, and say it does absolutely make sense. All I can say is, with regard to the student population, it's very much in hand. and a strong hand that we're taking at the moment with regards to, you know, sort of transmission within university environments, and that sort of age group between 18 and 24 and even up to sort of 29. We're very much paying strong attention to that at the moment. And there are lots of different work streams and projects that are focusing on that particular age group. So I do completely acknowledge your concerns. And yeah, take that on board, and I wish you all the best, all of you, for your events.
Thanks, Gemma. Thanks, George. Jonathan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say again, George raises an important point. If you looked across all of our districts and boroughs, it actually varies. So whereas we see within the Warwick district area a slightly younger group that tends to dominate our figures in terms of COVID positive cases, it's a different grouping were we to go to Nuneaton and Bedworth or to Rugby, and a different group again if we were to go to Stratford. So there are variances depending on the area that you are from, the district and borough that you live in. From a very personal point of view, and it is very personal, the one thing I've found quite uncomfortable throughout all of the conversations is how much there's been a focus on certain parts of our community in terms of transmission and spread. And I think the one big thing about Remembrance events, which is why it's so close to my particular heart, is it's one of those many events in the year that actually bring people together for a common reason. And that's what makes it so special. And we're remembering people who have done something really extraordinary for our country. So rather than focus on where the element of spread is, I'd love it to be this year that it's something actually that brings people together and makes something very positive for our communities. So that's just a very personal message from me.
Thanks, Jonathan, and very well said. I'm conscious we're close to 7 o'clock now. There's still just the opportunity if anybody wants to add. I see. Oh, Stephen, I see your finger go up.
Just very briefly, one of the things we've been grappling with is obviously we're very clear that we want to have a shared message, effectively remember from home. And what we've been grappling with is the more we make the point that there is an event, but we want you to stay away from it, the kind of more people know there's an event and might then think, oh, I'd like to go to it. So we've been, to some degree, if you like, well, partly because all these discussions have been going on so late, it's been very hard to go out with clear messaging to our partners and communities. So I guess we're just trying to grapple with that we don't want to raise a massive profile of an event to be then saying don't come to it. So if anyone's got any advice on that, we'd be most grateful. So sorry, it's more of a comment than a question, really.
Yeah, it's one around, I suppose, messaging, isn't it? Which we have spoken about. Yeah, Jonathan, your hand's up. Is that an old hand or?
Yeah, it's gone from a new hand to an old hand, Ian. I have no answer for Stephen. I think some of the stuff that Gemma was saying earlier around people coming to their front doorstep, you know, getting those messages out, which is, you know, just take a moment. You know, the 11 o'clock on the 11th is obviously a very important time, but if that just means just take a moment at that time, doesn't mean you have to come to an event to remember, does it? So
can I just ask, are those messages very prominent now on the borough councils and the county council's website? They're all out there now, are they?
Yeah, we've got the guidance out, Stephen, as well. So if anybody does want our guidance, it's on the Warwickshire County Council website. I'm sure we can share it with you.
Yeah, we'll be posting that at the end of this webinar. Gemma?
Yeah, it was just to echo what Jonathan had said there, really. I think there's a lot to be said from promoting, you know, a local community type spirit with regards to, as I say, you know, having the 2-minute silence, having the clap. It was hugely moving when our community did that for the NHS, and I just sort of feel like, you know, it's a good opportunity to promote that. And I think also at times like this, it's a part of a part of you wants to sort of personally remember and really kind of reflect on those times, and that's a really significant part of the day. And I think you can still do that. We can still do this, but just in a different way. And I think it's about really promoting that strongly and early on.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. Paul?
Just one last thing for me, really, that was mentioned at a previous meeting I dealt with. Simple things as well, like we all know that children did rainbows and things like that during COVID. I know it's short notice and things like that, and half term's nearly over, but it's seeing if you engage with any local schools and getting the children there to draw poppies and put them in the windows and things like that, like they did with the rainbows for COVID. So simple things like that to get the community involved, but from their home. It's just trying to think outside the box so people feel involved in the event without actually physically being there.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Thank you. Well, I think we've had a very productive discussion. It's been great to see a good geographic spread around the county, north and south. And we will be posting links to this webinar and one we hosted yesterday that covered slightly different ground. I'd welcome your interest in those. So if you'd like us to share those links with you, if you email business@ with your email address and contact details, we can send it on to you. And do please share with your contacts if you think they're relevant. But thank you to the panel for your time and preparation today, and again to those who joined the call this evening and shared their questions and worries and good practice. Thank you very much for that. We'll post some useful links, including the guidance that Warwickshire's put together with the inputs of others, such as the British Legion. And as others have touched on, we wish you all the best with your preparations as we remember in these very strange times. So thank you very much all.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Good night.